There are two kinds of people in this world. The people who fail to do what they know they should, and those who keep doing things they know they shouldn't. Guess what? You're both. Hi, I'm your podcast host and life and business coach, Marcy Barker, aka your loving kick in the pants. In this podcast, I'll teach you the 6 steps of my accountability code framework that will enable you to wake up with clarity and show up with aligned action steps that make follow through easy and peaceful. When you're ready for more, head to marcybarker.com and we'll chat about your next goal. All right, let's dive in. Hello, my beautiful people. Today on Your Loving Kick in the Pants, we're going to talk about the difference between waking up and showing up. And the reason why I wanted to cover this topic is because I've been doing a lot of networking lately, and it was actually really cool. I went to a gala last week, and it was 40 minutes away from my home, and I met somebody, and they're like, "Oh, I was at the place that you spoke last week." And it's just been really cool because that's happened 5 or 6 times as I've networked. I'm meeting new people who happen to hear me speak, and I've always asked people, did you do the worksheet? And what came about from you learning about the code? Because I want feedback. I always want feedback on if it was helpful, if they enjoyed it. And of course, I want to be able to help them if they feel like they're ready to take action. And what's super cool is that everybody I've talked to took action on what they wrote down on their paper, which means I clearly articulated the accountability code. There was one person who was like, all of the steps kind of seem to run together for me. And I'm like, that's a good thing because it's a natural way of taking action. But the reason I do what I do is I want to help people get better at certain areas where they're lacking. So what I wanted to talk about on the podcast today was how to recognize when you are doing way too much to the point of overwhelm and burnout, because that is a sign that you're out of balance and you are lacking accountability in an area. Because, hear me out, showing up and doing a lot and doing stuff for other people and not being able to take a break, that is you doing really good at showing up, but you are training yourself to ignore waking up. So waking up is reflection, humility, and planning. And showing up is implementing commitment and feedback. So if you think about your busy schedule, your busy life, and all you're doing is implementing stuff, which means you're doing stuff and you have commitments and all you do is a checklist and you're just constantly trying to keep up with all your responsibilities. And then the feedback you're getting is, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, I don't have any help. You are going overboard on showing up. Now, overboard on showing up is a good indicator that things are out of balance. And there are some people like me, type A, who love to get things done and they find comfort in being busy. But I'm here to tell you that if you are going overboard on showing up, it's time for a change. It's time for you to take a step back and get things off your plate that don't need to be there. But more importantly, we have to open up the connection for reflection, humility, and planning. So waking up, usually I tell people, congratulations, you're an expert, because you can reflect all day long. There's no escaping yourself. But humility comes into play when you recognize, like, you're not the most important person, but in doing everything and all the tasks by yourself, there is a belief that you are a very important person and you're the only one who can handle these tasks. There is also the underlying belief that nobody else can do it as good as you, or there's fear of dropping the ball and the quality just won't be like it needs to be. So I hope you can see that if you are showing up a lot, that it can be a sign that things are out of balance. Okay, so let's say you're on the other side. What does it look like if you're going overboard on waking up, but you're failing to show up? Now, if you're going overboard with waking up, this means you're thinking a lot. You are daydreaming a lot, you're planning a lot, you're viewing yourself as, I could do that, I could do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, but you're almost in analysis paralysis where you're just thinking, and not doing enough action. Like the needle is not moving in your business, or it's not moving in your life, or you have a ton of journals and to-do lists that just get ignored, okay? You might bounce around a lot between, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but because you're thinking about so much, you're not taking the time to actually implement or commit to seeing something through. So if you are at a place where you're like, you know what, Marcy, I can see that there is an imbalance. Don't worry. Just like my podcast intro says, you're both people, actually. If you're not doing things you know you should, or you're doing things you know you shouldn't, that's okay. That is totally life. But when the balance gets too wonky, that's when we have to take a step back and say, you know what? It's time for me to go through the code again and apply it. So I want to focus more on the people who are showing up way too much, because that means you're lacking the wherewithal to pause and wake up. Okay. So first off, you have to recognize if you're doing too much. So if you are the kind of person that's like, yeah, I am showing up a lot, I am doing a lot, I'm exhausted, and I'm kind of over it. I want to do something different so that I don't get to a point where you're like, you know what, I throw in the towel and I'm completely done. So ask yourself if you are fulfilled in what you're doing. Ask yourself if you are finding the joy in all of the tasks that you're doing. When I spoke a couple weeks ago, I used the example of doing laundry. How many of you are taking on laundry responsibilities that aren't yours? And a lot of people raise their hand. And I said, how many of you are not doing any laundry responsibilities that are yours? And more hands went up. And I used that example as accountability can look a lot of different ways. And I asked people, raise your hand if you like doing laundry that's not yours. And one lady out of 200 raised her hand. And I said, you know, that's totally fine, because everybody's going to have their own method for what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing. So the next thing we need to talk about in doing too much is there's probably a fear of letting go. And I know that I have experienced this quite a bit. And I actually had a conversation with my husband over the freaking dishes. And we talked about, you know, I told my husband, if I have to constantly worry whose turn it is to do the dishes, like that's exhausting and I could use some help in that department. And I said, it's like all the tabs open on my computer. If I have a tab on business, a tab on life, a tab on this relationship, a tab on this task, a tab on service, all these different tabs are open. And there's one tab that's constantly open and it's called the dishes. I said, do you think that you could take over the tab and I could close it so I could focus on the rest of the tabs that are open? And he said, yeah, I think I can do that, but you'll probably have to remind me. And I was like, no, you don't understand. If the tab is open for me at all, that means I have to monitor it and it takes my mental energy. And I said, will you allow me to close my tab on the dishes and you keep it open, which means I don't have to worry about whose turn it is to do the dishes. Like, you can just handle it and I will not cry and complain about it. And he agreed to it. And I said, perfectly. And I even wrote it on my calendar. I documented that this is the day I don't have to cry and complain about dishes anymore. And it has been a challenge to let go, because there are lots of times I've walked into the kitchen wanting to make myself some lunch and the kitchen's just a pigsty because the dishes didn't get done. So when we talk about the fear of letting go, some of the things you might say is like, nobody else will do it. They can't do it right. Or it's just easier if I do it myself. Those things might be true, that people can't do it as good as you, or it might just be easier if you do it yourself. But do you enjoy being stuck in the habit of doing too much? Like, do the dishes bring you joy? Yes or no? Like, you have to seriously consider which priorities in your life need to take responsibility or priority. Hey, my beautiful people. The message of waking up and showing up is yours for the taking. In fact, it's completely free. All you got to do is take this quick action. I've recorded my entire audiobook and I'd love for you to consume it between episodes. Head to marcybarker.com to get instant access to the accountability code, Wake Up and Show Up. So, there is a big difference between a responsibility and control. So I have asked my husband, do you feel a sense of responsibility to have the dishes done like I do? Because I feel like I do the dishes even when I don't want to, because I feel a responsibility to get it done. And my husband's like, no, I don't. Like, it's just not something that I think about. And we are so different in the way that we were raised and our expectations. And it's been an interesting conversation and an interesting thought process for me to think, okay, why are the dishes such a big deal? And we can go a little bit deeper on, I want to feel safe. I want to feel like I'm taken care of, but I also want to spend my best energy on something productive and not just dishes. So when I look at the dishes and they might be dirty, I have to remind myself the most important thing I can spend my energy on is something other than the dishes. And that gives me the sense of, okay, I can be patient because that's not my tab. It's not my responsibility. And I have told my husband and my family, like, if I want to do the dishes, I'll do the dishes, but it's like, I'm helping you out. It's not my responsibility, and I'll help out when my mood is good and I'm not doing it with resentment or overwhelm or to the point where I might get burned out. So you have to ask yourself, like, what happens if you don't let go? Like, what is going to happen if you continue up the patterns of me doing everything, me being in charge of everything, me doing everything by myself? What is the cost of that? And I don't know about you, but me, I have been burned out for that reason of me doing way too much. And I think we have to go through a lot of cycles sometimes before we recognize, like, okay, this is the final time I'm going to throw in the towel. And there are a lot of times where I look at the kitchen, I'm like, man, I could do that. I could knock that out real fast. But it's actually a practice of discipline for me to walk past the dishes and not do them, because I'm practicing waking up and being intentional and not being so overboard with showing up. So I hope that you're starting to see, like, maybe there are some things around my house or in my business that I can let go of. Because when you're talking about being accountable doesn't mean doing everything perfect. And it doesn't mean doing everything yourself. Being accountable means that you are meeting your desired expectations. So if you're expecting yourself to get 100 tasks done and you're not doing it, then you're failing to be accountable. But let's pretend you took 50 tasks off your plate and now you are holding yourself responsible for 50 tasks. And you're actually pretty good at 50 tasks. You actually get, 75 tasks done a day. Guess what? Your ability to be accountable just skyrocketed because you lowered your expectations of yourself. And the way that you can do this is to pass off those tabs, to pass off those responsibilities, and practice letting other people pick up the slack. Because if you are the only one picking up the slack, then that's how we get out of balance and you just continue to show up, and the waking up begins to be diminished. And that can be really dangerous. So here are a few practical steps on letting go and lowering the amount of showing up you're doing in order to improve your waking up. So first thing is identify what only you can do. Okay, I'm not the only person in my family that can do the dishes. I promise you that. My youngest is 10 years old now. We know how to do the dishes. That right there is like, oh, nope, I'm definitely not the only one in the house that can do the dishes. Second thing is recognize what tasks can be delegated. So this is the conversation I had with my husband of like, hey, I've had the tab open, but I'm ready to close the tab and I need to know that the tab is going to be open on somebody's radar. Can that be you? Step 3, find the right people. My husband, we figured out that the 2 oldest girls can alternate loading the dishwasher and the 2 youngest girls can alternate unloading the dishwasher. And the 2 oldest girls are like, it's not fair. We should have more people loading because everybody knows how to do it. And now I think, I'm not sure because I'm not in charge of it, but I think the older 3 now take turns loading the dishwasher, and it's shifted a little bit. And it's made a lot of sense. And I am happy to say I put my husband in charge. I found the right people and he found the right people. I don't think he loads the dishwasher that much. I think he has the kids do it. So that's been working out. The next step is set up systems for accountability, obviously. So if you're going to pass something off, I can walk past the kitchen and recognize like if it's done or not. And I'm okay to not nag my husband because I don't nag. I'm not going to nag, but I'm okay to remind him and be like, hey, can you get the dishes done? We're having we're having friends over or neighbors over and the dishes need to be done. Not just so we can prep the meal, but so that we have enough dishes. So setting up a system for accountability in our own dynamic has been like me being reminded that my tab is closed and me only helping out when I can do it without being resentful or overwhelmed or burned out. And then the last thing is giving myself permission to rest. Like I've had to tell my husband again, when I walk past a sink full of dirty dishes, it's not me not being aware or me being lazy. That's literally me practicing putting myself first and giving myself some rest because that's what I need. I need time to wake up more effectively so that I can show up more effectively and with the right intention. So I want you guys to know sometimes it feels like it can be really difficult,
but it is 100% necessary for you to continually evaluate how you're showing up and if you are training yourself to ignore waking up. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is reiterating the fact that you deserve it. It's not failing if you're like, oh, I got to step back and not do so much. It is absolutely not failing. It is you readjusting and you becoming aligned again. And you deserve it. That's all I can say. You deserve it. So I want you to think about one thing that you can delegate this week, or one thing you can let go of, one thing that you can do to stop showing up out of alignment. Because when you allow yourself to step back, that's you saying yes to waking up more effectively. I want you to know that it's okay to go through the transition. It's okay to admit when you're like, I'm too burned out. I've been doing a lot. It's time for me to step back. But I am sure you've all recognized the times where you were so tired and overwhelmed that you just broke instead of took a rest. And I don't want that to happen to you. It's not that easy to recover when you break or you're burned out, but it is much easier to realign and adjust, especially when you get to pick how that happens. So I wish you good luck. Message me, reach out anytime. You guys know you can always book a call with me, and I'll see you next week for another episode of Your Loving Kick in the Pants.
Thank you for listening, friends. If you got value out of this episode, I would love for you to drop a review or share this with a friend. Let's be real. Let's spread the word, because we all know someone who could use your loving kick in the pants.